Hello and welcome everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm here from this HEALEY Center for ALS at Mass General. Tonight I'm here with our patient navigation team. Very happy to be here with Alison and Catherine. And I'm giving everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. I see that the numbers are going up and always recognize friendly names. So thank you again for following us every week as well as new names. So thank you so much for joining us. And so we can go to the next slide. We don't have a guest speaker tonight, so we just wanted to provide our regular weekly updates about the platform trial. As you know, we have been testing 5 drugs so far, and one is enrolling. That's the one that's labeled in pink, regimen E. The drug is Trialose. Next slide. And so at this time, we're very, very excited that we continue to see increase in enrollment. So thank you to all of you who are participating in the trial and everyone who's also supporting people in the trial. Obviously, the only way to test new drugs is really to, or bring new drugs to the market is really to continue to do as many trials as possible. So thank you so much for joining this regimen E. Right now, as you may know, if you've been following us, our target sample size is about 160. And as you can see on the slide, we have already enrolled 89 individuals who have been, starting to receive study drug, but many more have been screened or are in screening. So I do expect this number to continue to go up, and we also have room for new participants who have not been screened yet. So really great to see the progress there. Next slide. And this is the number of sites that are enrolling at this time. We continue to grow. Now we have a network of 47 sites. Some are from the original group that joined the trial from the very beginning, from regimen A, B, and C. Those are labeled in blue. And the green sites are the sites that were added to the platform for regimen E. So really, really excited that we have more people, more sites. They are also underlined on the right. So if you want to know kind of which ones are the original ones and which ones are the new ones, if you have any questions, please check our website with a site map and contacts. We continue to work with other sites, hoping to bring on board even more sites for regimen E. But again, right now we already have a good group of sites, 47 sites that are enrolling. So please contact the site next to you. Next slide. And as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Catherine and Alison, either by phone or email. We will continue to provide these weekly webinars, and we have a great newsletter, the ALS link. You can sign up for that. It's not too much email, don't worry. It's just, just a few important emails when we have important announcements. We do have a great list of guest speakers. We're going to meet with a couple of investigators in September. One from both actually from new sites. Tafik is from UPMC in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, and Michael is from Swedish Medical, our second Seattle site. So really excited that both sites have joined. There are 2 of the green sites that have joined the trial recently. And I'm also very excited about the September 22nd meeting, where we're going to have Mariah and Megan. They are our lead site monitors for the platform trial. As you may know, if we've been following the series, and by the way, all the recordings are posting on our website, we try to also have speakers who can talk to us about the clinical trial process in general, so that the community has an understanding of how sort of data is collected, cleaned, managed, and specifically Mariah and Megan lead a large team of site monitors. The site monitors are ones that are the people that basically go physically on site to visit all the 47 sites or the other sites that have been participating so far, and they basically go and check the data, literally data point by data point. So they really make sure that there is absolutely high quality data, which is so important in the context of trials that could actually make a big difference and really bring new drugs to market. So they'll explain to us how this process works. I think that was the last slide. And so I think we can stop sharing. So I see that there's a number of comments about yesterday's FDA meeting. So thank you so much for all these wonderful comments that I see here in the Q&A box. For those of you who have not been who have not joined the meeting yesterday, so yesterday there was a second advisory committee meeting that was hosted by the FDA, and I haven't checked if the recording is up on the FDA's YouTube channel, but probably it is. And maybe Catherine or Alison, if you have the link, you can post it in the chat, please. Thank you so much for that. And basically, the first meeting was posted, and now we have this second meeting. So the advisory committee is essentially a group of experts or a panel that's invited by the FDA to provide scientific comments or scientific review of the data, and there was actually a positive vote in favor of AMX 35 yesterday, which obviously is great news. And with several of my colleagues, we were on the call yesterday, specifically Dr. Sukovic and Dr. Berry from MGH spoke during the meeting, and then there was a number of colleagues and really close colleagues who spoke during a section of the meeting called open public hearing, where they really provided their own perspectives, as well as a lot of patients and caregivers who did so too. So it was really a community event, really with academia and as well as patients and caregivers providing their thoughts. So the bottom line is that the committee voted in favor. The vote is not binding. I just want to make sure that that's clear, that the FDA still can decide in any direction whether they approve the drug or not. We know that they've committed to September 29th as the date when they will make a decision. So we'll know basically by the end of the month whether the drug is approved or not. And so to that end, there was one question in the chat. Somebody asked, if the outcome is positive. So if the FDA does end up approving AMX 35 in September, what's your feeling on the time frame? It will be made available to US patients. Well, I think the company is committed to doing it quickly, so I cannot speak on behalf of the company, but I think I would imagine that within a few weeks it will definitely be available. As you know, there is an insurance reimbursement process that needs to happen, so that when the individual person will be able to have access to the drug will depend on their own insurance plan and their reimbursement process for that. That said, I do know that the company is working very hard on this, really kind of, to make sure that we are best positioned. So there was also somebody who asked me to provide a short summary. And so hopefully I provided you with the information that you were requesting, but if you have any other questions, please let me know. I think I took all of the AMX questions, and I see, thank you, Catherine, that you posted the recording. Now there's a few, and I'm sorry, there's another question about AMX 35 that just came in. So if the drug is approved, will future trial arms allow it? Yeah, absolutely. So when we want to make sure that people who join the trial have access to standard of care drugs. So right now, people who are enrolled in the trial so far have had access to riluzole and or edaravone, and they've been allowed to take these drugs. Now, for future regimens, so we're working on a number of regimens for 2023. So future regimens, by that time, the drug will be approved, and so that will be allowed. And our statisticians are working very hard, I should say, on simulations and the impact of that, because every time a new drug is added, it adds complexity, which was actually a good thing. So we're happy about that, but we do need to re-register the trial a little bit from a statistical perspective to account for changes in standard of care. So we're actively working on that. For regimen E, which is the one that's enrolling right now, we're still discussing the impact of that, because they're sort of caught in the period of transition. So I don't, again, no final decisions there. We're still evaluating that in close collaboration with the industry partners. All our statisticians are working hard on this, and the agency. There's a few questions about when the HEALEY regimen outcomes will be announced. So I hate to be kind of to not be able. I wish I could give you an exact date, but I can tell you it's gonna become available very soon. Again, we're really working hard on finalizing all the data points. Again, it's a complex process, but we're working hard. And again, I hope that either by the ALS link or these webinars we'll know very soon during one of the next meetings. So in terms of, there's a question if regimen E is testing AMX35. No, so at this point, no, because so regimen E is testing trialos, and AMX35 as of right now is not available yet. So so again, we are working on what to do if AMX35 is approved. And while I think, I'm hopeful, obviously we won't know until that happens. There's a question about COVID boosters. So, if people are taking drugs like, for example, AMX35 or other drugs, if there's any sort of relationship with the COVID booster. So I would just recommend that you follow up with your primary care physician. There isn't any specific recommendation for ALS or for AMX35 or for any of the drugs that we're talking about here. There isn't any specific interaction with COVID boosters. As you know, there's sort of an updated booster for COVID. And so please follow your sort of general regulations for general guidance for the general population. So I think, I think most of the questions I've taken. So again, the question about sort of the timelines, essentially. So timelines again, so we are working hard on regimens A, B, and C. Those are the ones that we're going to have results from very soon. We're still working hard on completing regimen D, so that's a little bit delayed compared to A, B, and C because it started 6 months later. That said, they actually caught up. So the results will just be after A, B, and C because of the great participation from the patient community and great enrollment. So we again, there's a few questions about kind of where we are with regimen D. Again, we're working hard to lock the database and do all the analysis for D. So again, that's going to happen over the next few weeks. And in terms of new regimens, so there's another question about how about new regimens? So we are working, in the midst of all of this, we're also working hard with brand new companies that we haven't discussed here yet. And so we have 2, possibly 3 companies that will start in 2023. And so we, as soon as kind of the contracts are signed, there will, more concrete timelines and announcements will be made. I think I took all the questions, Alison or Catherine. Did I miss anything that I should have answered?
Dr. Paganoni, I wonder if you might take a second and explain what happens before the database can be locked. I've had some questions about locking the database and what that means.
Yeah, so before locking the database, so first of all, locking the database means that the data can no longer be changed after that point. So the data needs to be collected and cleaned. That's the verb that we use. We clean the data in the sense that it has to essentially be verified, so that we have site monitors. I mentioned earlier we're going to have 2 speakers who will join our webinar on September 22nd, I believe. And we have a number, really an army of site monitors who go on site and verify that the data that's collected at the site, meaning, for example, ALS-FRSR results, for example, or breathing capacity scores. They look at all the data. They look at, when you go and see your physician or your research coordinator, they'll write down numbers. And so those are verified one by one in person. And then they are entered into the database. So that's one step. And then the data managers then do a number of logic checks and generate reports within the database to make sure that, everything kind of aligns. Then there's another step from biostatistics, and they essentially start producing results on sort of blinded data, on scrambled data. So, and those are not, the final results, but they basically check that all the statistical programs, we're talking of thousands of different analyses that need to be done. And so they check that all of them align. Also, a lot of the vendor data needs to come back. I do want to mention that we have a lot of biomarker data, a lot of data that comes from different vendors like smartphone apps or things like that, like voice recordings or other things. And they can come in different stages. So depending on how critical they are, they may or may not be needed before database lock. It depends a little bit on what data it is. So all of this to say that there's an enormous amount of data that needs to be verified and cleaned and organized for analysis. So again, the statisticians go in and make sure that everything, that once they run their programs on the final data, everything will work. And all of these leads to database lock. Once the data is locked, you can no longer change it. So you have to be very careful that every single thing has been verified. And I should say also each site, each physician signs off. They verify on their end. So when you go and see your coordinator and your physician at your site, after all of this has been verified centrally by us, they also have to sign off. After all of this happens, so this is really in the spirit of the highest data integrity and data quality. After all of this has been completed, and again, we're operating across the country at multiple sites. That's why it takes time to do all of this. The data is locked. The database is locked and can no longer be changed. And then all the programs that have been prepped, all the statistical programs, etc., are run on the real data, the data that's been logged. I do want to mention something that, especially for those of you who followed the advisory committee yesterday, just so what does it mean to do something in a pre-specified manner versus a post-hoc way? So that's very important. So when you do analysis in a pre-specified manner, that's the highest, the most robust, highest quality analysis. So basically, you plan all of this before you see the data, before you even log the database. And you write down your exact plan ahead of time. So that's something that, there's basically no possibility, of bias, because again, everything is done before. Things that are done afterwards, after the database has been logged and unblinded, then that becomes post-hoc, becomes after the fact in a way. And so it can still be valid and very important information. But again, it's kind of, that's kind of sort of the turning point. That's why it's so important to do things in a certain order. And somebody asked, in order to save time, can data be reviewed throughout the trial prior to the end of the trial? Absolutely. Data is reviewed in real time. But keep in mind that there's many parties involved. So you have essentially the site that needs to provide the data. The site monitors go on a regular basis on site throughout the trial, and they clean the data, and then the data managers and statisticians again run all the programs, and then it goes back to the site and they have to make edits. I know it sounds like a time-consuming process. I just want to mention, like, for example, just for the first 3 regimens, we're going to have about 5,000 tables of results. So again, it's just the volume of the data. If you consider the biomarkers, the things that happen also at the vendor level, biomarkers, genetics, and all of that kind of comes from outside. So it's a very complex process. There's a few questions about, people ask me if AMX is approved, will it be allowed in other trials, not the platform trial, kind of trials run by other companies? That's an interesting question. Like I don't know, because obviously it will depend on the sponsor of the trial. Dr. Sukovic is the sponsor of the platform trial, and we work in collaboration with many companies, but other companies could also do their trial outside of the platform trial, and they sponsor those trials. So they will have to make that decision. I would say that in general, there is certainly interest and commitment to allowing standard of care. So I would imagine that, ultimately AMX will be allowed by at least the majority of the trials, unless there is a safety interaction, safety problems there. But so I would imagine that it will be allowed. I would say that the timelines depend a little bit, because, if a trial is about to finish, they may not be able to allow it right now, because otherwise it would affect the results. So it all depends, kind of future trials, meaning things that have not started yet. Absolutely, I would expect that the vast majority, if not all, will allow it, unless there is a safety concern. Things that are in process right now, again, it will depend a little bit on how the timelines line. So there's a question about how many participants are enrolled in Regimen E. So right now we have 89 people that have been randomized and are receiving or started receiving study drug, but then we have over 100 that have been screened. So some of them may not be eligible, but some may already be kind of in the screening process and about to start drug. So I think, you know, we're making excellent progress. We still have a few spots. So if people are interested, absolutely. Question about, is the open label extension or EAP data included in the primary assessment for the HEALEY regimen? So so for these particular regimens that we're talking about here, A, B, and C, and D, no, the primary assessments are on the placebo-controlled portion of the trial, which is 6 months long. Now, the open label extension is still ongoing, and that's why it cannot be really part of the primary assessment because we haven't finished it yet. But then once the first kind of set of results is available, then we can integrate, we can do the same cleaning process with open label extension data. That's already started, obviously, but you know, we can complete it to supplement the first set of results. You know, again, it's we're going to get a lot of information. EAPs are a little bit different. They're separate. They serve a different purpose. So they're very important to give access to people who cannot participate in the trial, and they're important to get some safety signals or some clinical and biomarker data in people who are not eligible for the trial, but they wouldn't be directly integrated. They can complement and supplement the information, but they won't be directly integrated into the platform trial results because they have the target. By definition, they are designed for a different population, for people who are not eligible for the trial. There's a couple of questions about other programs. So, you know, questions about other companies, for example, Curalis, they have a great, very interesting phase 1 trial that's about to start targeting stathmin-2 with antisense oligonucleotides. These are early trials, but absolutely, I mean, obviously we know them well, and it's a great, you know, kind of company and target. So hopefully there will be opportunities for interaction along the line. And then there were questions about, you know, whether the spinal fluid, the CSF fluid from people with ALS can be toxic, because there was a paper recently in mice, I want to emphasize, not in people, but in mice, showing that the spinal fluid or CSF from mouse models of ALS had some possibly some toxic material in it. And so yes, I mean, we don't know yet if that's something that's relevant in humans, but that's something that many people are researching. So that's what I can tell you, that I know many colleagues who are doing research on this. Whether it will be possible to leverage that for treatments, I don't know yet, but people are looking into that. There's a question about which phase of the trial this is. So so basically, these are all, the ones that we're talking about right now are all phase 2/3, meaning that positive, because of the way this is set up, positive results could lead to a registration of a new drug. So it's so-called late phase. In other words, the results, if we get a positive result from any of these regimens, the way the trial is set up, we have very robust processes I just described for data cleaning, high data quality, etc. Everything is done kind of top notch so that we can submit the data to the FDA for approval of a new drug if the results are positive. So that's a late stage trial, or phase 2/3. And that's why sometimes, you know, I know sometimes we get questions about, are these new drugs, you know, eligible for the platform trial? Sometimes, even if they're very exciting, they may be too early. But certainly we are in constant collaboration and contact with many companies who have very early products that are very promising. And so assuming that they go through their phase 1, for example, or early stage, like a phase 2A, they can hopefully then transition quickly to the platform trial. That's the idea, that they can complete kind of their first in human, for example, studies or phase 1 studies, and then transition to the platform trial. And so, and then there's a question about whether there's many companies interested in being added to the platform trial. And I'm glad to report that yes, the interest is very high. We have 2-3 companies essentially that we're working on for 2023. And so I really think that that's not going to be a limiting factor because of the robustness of the platform. In other words, again, all these sort of levels of data quality and monitoring and all of that, that's important. It takes time, it takes care, it takes a large team. But again, we want to do it so that there continues to be interest. It's really industry standard. And most importantly, if any of these drugs is positive, then we can, submit an application to the FDA, hopefully. Yeah, there's a great question about interactions. So right now in ALS, we've been in this situation where there was only one and then 2 drugs, riluzole and radicava. And now if there was another drug like AMX35, now we're talking about potentially 3 drugs given together. And then on top of that, you can give, an experimental drug. And so the question, it's a great question, will there be an interaction? So I'm glad to report that in the center trial that tested AMX35, we did have the majority of participants, in fact, were taking riluzole and or radicava on top of AMX35, obviously. And in the center trial that tested AMX35, there was no safety signal. There was no safety concern. So that's great. Now, obviously, now we're talking about having 3 drugs, and then on top of that, another drug, another experimental drug, because now the new standard of care hopefully will be 3 drugs. And so then obviously, we would have to monitor that. That's why all this safety monitoring and all these, kind of procedures that we go through and having a medical monitor and the SMB, etc., they're all to make sure that we monitor exactly for that. So far so good, but obviously, as we test more drugs, we have to, we have to continue to check. There's another great question about, are patients interested in non-drug interventions? For example, brain stimulation or other devices, for example? That's a great question. I mean, I think, if the science is there, I think that absolutely. I personally am also involved in small scale sort of non-drug intervention studies, and I think they're very important as well. So I certainly don't rule it out for the future. I think it's, definitely an interesting modality. We just need the science to be there, of course, for all of that. I think I took all the questions. Did I miss any?
I wanted to kind of follow up to that one. So the question about TMS or non-drug interventions, is somebody able to participate in the platform trial, which is a drug intervention, and also participate in another trial if that other trial isn't a drug intervention?
Well, it depends. So normally I would say no, especially if the other trial is an intervention. So if you give an intervention, for example, brain stimulation, that's in a way like being in another trial, and you cannot test 2 things at the same time, 2 drugs or 1 drug and one device, because otherwise you would not be able to analyze the results. You could not, if there's an improvement, for example, it would be very hard to tell if the improvement is due to the drug or to the device. And so that's why you can only test 1 thing at the time. Now we do have, I just want to mention, that's a little bit separate, but we do have people that are co-enrolled in observational studies. Many of you have been so generous to dedicate time and effort to participate in things like, donating blood samples or, testing, new outcome measures or things like that. Generally speaking, those are not a new intervention. Those are just, basically to collect biomarker data or samples or things like that. Donating samples for research, those are generally allowed because essentially, the difference is this an intervention or is this, an observational study? Observational studies are allowed. And the question again, if somebody take, this very specific question, if somebody is in an EAP and also can they also be in an interventional brain stimulation device study? It depends. It depends on the actual EAP and how it's written. So for that, I cannot completely answer because it depends on the EAP. So I don't know. I don't want to mislead you. It really depends on how the EAP is written. Great. thank you so much. And well, we got a lot of questions. So sorry, it was a little bit rapid fire, but always a pleasure to get all these excellent questions and great to keep the conversation going. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.